Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and I'm the host of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Krista Lee Beck of Comma Copywriters, Shireen Strasberg of 87th Street Creative, and Tim Holliday of Space Station Investments. I'm forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast, and we are always looking for more sponsors. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a creative studio that brings entertainment quality animation and illustration to brands that want to stand out in gaming, tech, and pop culture. We help companies tell stories that resonate with nerdy, imaginative audiences, and we turn viewers into communities. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign. All right. So with us today, we have Danielle LeCourt. Welcome to the show, Danielle.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. We've never had someone with a focus on voice, so this is going to be really cool to kind of get into the details and the creative side of that. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and introduce you here. So Danielle is the founder of LeCourt, a voice-first content studio that helps experts turn conversations into strategy. A former professional athlete and writer, she found her true medium in audio, the place where craft meets aliveness and where discipline and presence converge. Her work with institutions like Harvard, NASA, Roche, and University of Pennsylvania is all driven by one question: what can happen when we treat conversations as art? Very cool, fun intro. Quick, curious question: what type of professional athlete were you?
I played volleyball. So I grew up playing volleyball. That was like the first, can we say half of my life? Is it for more than half of my life was as a volleyball player. So I played at the University of Utah and then played overseas in Finland for a little bit.
Oh, very cool. That's pretty awesome. I never played professional anything, but I played a lot of soccer. Sacrificed 2 of my 3 torn ACLs to that. So
yeah, I'm from Utah, where everyone's a skier, and so like whenever people find out that I'm from here, they're like, "Oh, you must be a big skier," and it's like, no, we were never allowed to go up the mountain specifically for our ACLs. Like, we'll not go skiing until you're 25.
Yeah, it's a liability for sure. Yeah. I always snowboarded, but we have, I'm in Virginia, so we've got little tiny mountains compared to, Utah. The first time I went to landed in Salt Lake, I was like, oh my God, like walking around, I was like, I thought I'd seen mountains before. That is a mountain.
Yeah. We're super lucky here.
Awesome. All right. So before we get into today's topic, I'd love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So how long have you been in your industry, and what project are you most proud of so far?
So that's one of those questions, right? Like, I feel like you ask a lot of creatives this, and it's like, my career only makes sense in retrospect, and it was a winding road. But I actually started my career once I was finished with volleyball in research. So research kind of served as the foundation for my career. And then I moved into communications from there because I had 2 dreams as a kid. One was to be a professional athlete, and one was to be a professional writer. And as a lot of writers learn as you get older, if you want to actually make money and do it as a pro, you kind of have to morph and shape to whatever the market, demands of you. So really leaned into writing that was about 15 years ago, which dates me, I'm sure. But and it's funny because through my work as a writer, it's this idea of voice and conversations and interviews really started to surface as like, oh, this is my medium. And so kind of wandering through this path, trying to make money as a writer and doing it, both as the owner of an agency and also within an agency and within other, working with researchers and scientists, kind of building on that research background, kind of like formed myself into this little corner of the market that I sit now, that people are like, wait, that's a job. But I think, how many creatives have that story as their background of like, I don't know, just kind of wandered through stuff I was interested in until I got here.
I think a lot more than most people think. I think if you're a creative, that story, in your heart, right? Like you're kind of exploring around, you like to create things. And it's like, ooh, I like that. Let me explore that way a little bit. And I see that a lot because, in the design space, which is where I came up, I studied graphic design and was part of AIGA for a long time, and now I'm on the Graphic Artist Guild board. But like, I see a lot of people that start in design as like a core place because you can't go to college for voice, or you can't go to college for like motion graphics. There aren't very many
Yeah.
places. Or I guess there may be some places for motion graphics and voice, but like they're very specialized schools, and they're usually around like video games or something, right? But like most of the bigger schools, they have a art department, and like the professional art people are like graphic design, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe so like that seems to be the place where a lot of creatives come through, at least that I've seen, which is an interesting thing. But everybody kind of finds their space in there, which is cool. And as these industries evolve, there's always new things popping up. So, like there wasn't a thing called motion graphics when I was, in college. Like there was animation, but I was like, did you want to do like, Disney stuff, or do you want to do marketing and advertising? Now there's like this in between thing. That's where my company is. I didn't know I wanted to start an animation design motion graphics studio, whatever that is,
Yeah.
when I started this. But yeah, so anyways, I can totally relate to that.
It's funny because so my husband is an attorney and when you're an attorney you have this like linear path towards being an attorney, and we joked that like for the first couple of years of our relationship, whenever I was meeting his people and they'd be like, what do you do, my answer was different every single time I answered it. And I don't know, I kind of love this about creatives, that it's like, don't box us in, we're gonna, depending on what we're interested in the moment, we're gonna like follow that. But there are those through lines, and like I said in the intro, the through line of my career has really just been conversations. And
Mm,
so I'm like, what if I just leaned in and really treated conversations and, the attention that kind of comes with those as an art form and as a medium. And so that's it's but try explaining that at a dinner party.
right. Yeah. It makes for an interesting conversation, I'm sure, right? It
Yeah.
isn't very black and white. Like, hey, I'm a doctor. Cool. What do
Yeah.
you specialize in? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great. I don't know anything about that, but that sounds fancy. Let's
Yeah.
say like attorney, same kind of thing, right? Like I do
Mhm.
this type of law. Yeah, but I love this idea that there's the through line is conversations, right? And understanding like the voice and understanding the like the story that kind of threads into that. So I'd love to get into that some more. Like, what does that really mean to you? What does that conversation at a dinner party actually look like?
Yeah. It's funny because in prepping for this episode, I've been really trying to think about like how can I pin that down? Because if I had to pin it down, and I think that this, I would argue that any creative is going to connect with this in their medium. It's this quality of attention that we can bring to a conversation, and a responsiveness and a willingness to kind of be open and human. I work with a lot of journalists for one of the clients that I work for, and it's print only. It's, just journalists getting the information, putting the story together and getting it out. And I've always felt limited by that format of an interview of, just let me get in, get the information, get the quote, whatever. And it's this more informative, transactional kind of interview. And it was when I got next to these kinds of interviewers that I realized like, oh, I don't think I do that. And it was more, I just enjoyed it so much that I feel like when you can really press in and bring a quality of attention to a conversation, it really opens up so many different facets of your experience within it, and also opens up so many spillover effects that that interview can have, that so many of the tangible things that I've gotten from the best interviews in my life have not just been the story, right? They've been like, oh, I had one client be like, we know that you really took care of the people, that they felt elated after they were done with their interview with you, that we know you're going to take care of our people and we want to hire you again. Or it's, you learn something cool about them as a human being and then they become your friend and now you have this lifelong friend. And the caliber of people I've been able to interview, NASA scientists, top Harvard researchers, that that you can find this common ground in humanity with, and just be able to, um back then it was help them jump off the page, but now it's like, I don't, let's not go on the page at all. Let's get that moment in time and let's put it out to human beings so that we can all be human beings, connecting with this information that's really important on this level that is really transformative.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of taking, having conversations with people that are, on these upper echelons of humanity and culture, depending on what aspect that is. But and just, getting conversations with them and having them speak about things that are just real and resonate with lots of people. Like we all are at the end of the day are just human beings trying to live and trying to be happy and healthy and want the best for our, family and our friends and our people. And when we start peeling back some of these surface layers, especially in times now where like we're all so divided in this country, particularly, like we all want 95% of the same shit. It's
Yeah.
really crazy. So I love the idea of just like making more tangible human conversations there and getting into those deeper things. I think that's definitely the way to do it. What do you see as the way that like other people, like you said, you'd been in some interviews and been like, oh, this is not what I do. What are some of
Mm.
those things that kind of like you think cheapen the quality of it? I know you said like, oh, they're just there for that one quote, but like, are there any other pieces of that you felt like were something you changed when you started developing your approach?
I think if I were to boil it down to one thing, I think that one of the things that I see other people doing that I don't seem to do is go into the interview thinking that I know what I'm looking for. I don't know what I'm
Oh,
looking for. I mean, of course you do generally, and you kind of know what you want the story to be about, but and maybe this is the researcher in me that when I started and I've spoken and taught research methods, and I teach a lot of qualitative methods, and one of them, oh, this is going to get so academic, but just bear with me. There's a
it's
payoff.
all right.
Um, there's a form of research called grounded theory that is basically inductive, which means you are going in open and then you're using what you find to put together a hypothesis rather than having a hypothesis and testing it, which is deductive, right? And so I think I've just always gone in um, curious about more than what I think the story is and not making that assumption that I know what I'm looking for. And that way you can actually have the space and the breathing room to when the person in front of you says something unexpected or glorious, which happens 90% of my interviews, they say something and you can grab onto it and be like, whoa, what does that mean? Or, it's this, again, quality of attention that opens you up to what's there rather than what you're looking for.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. It's funny. I definitely have never heard of the idea of like deductive versus inductive. Obviously, I understand deductive reasoning and all that sort of stuff, but
Yeah.
I go into all these. Like, if you listen to my last 101 episodes, I just talk. Like, I just get to know somebody and peel back the layers and understand their creative journey, or how they're interacting in this space of creativity and business. So that's interesting that's a methodology.
Yeah.
It's sort, but I
Yeah.
think that's because I'm ADD, that like it's just easier for me to flow that way, right? Like I get bored if there's too much structure, or like it just feels like not. It just takes the fun away, right? Like for me, I don't know, but I think there might be a happy medium, which is what I'm trying to explore here in my middle agedness. So
The happy medium. Well, and it as and you can have a general shape in mind, a general structure. Obviously, you're probably going to have a topic that you're covering, or you're going
right.
to, things like that. So you're already doing it. And having listened to your previous episodes, you are really good at that. And I think that and I don't know, here's my theory again with creatives. I think that creatives are used to a kind of, well, a quality to their attention, right? there's
Mm.
there's something. um I love talking to creatives because there's always an exuberance, not all, even if it comes through deadpan, like there's some kind of sparkle,
Oh
that
yeah.
a willingness to get excited about something. And those, I think, are the most alive and wonderful and easy conversations when you trust that the other person is gonna, well, and especially when you get that reflected back, like, oh, they think what I said was really cool, and then they want to offer more, and then they want to offer more. And as an interviewer, it's those moments of not even necessarily affirmation, but just attention and interest, and with a little bit of energy behind it. And then you can get so much more texture and humanity because they feel safe and they feel, like you're excited about what they're saying. And it helps that I am genuinely usually excited about what they're saying. It's not an act. I just really am curious and love people. But yeah, it's you do it. You're a natural, man.
Oh, thank you. And that yeah, I relate to all of that. I especially love the those types of situations where you're talking to someone that is a little more like we'll call it deadpan, not to be insulting or anything, but then you get them on that thing,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden it's like just this waterfall of like excitement of ideas and nuance and detail, and it's like that's really exciting to see, especially that contrast because some people are very stoic and very like they don't get excited except for about their thing. If you get them talking about their thing, it's like my kid, whatever he's talking about. If you're talking about something he's not interested in, it's very like not super engaged. But all of a sudden, we get into like one of his shows or one of the games he's into, it's like just going
Yeah.
on and on and on. And my wife and I were we were on a road trip one time and was talking to my son about this show he watches, and we're in the front seat and he's in the back. She's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and he's going on and on and on and on. And it was at least 30 to 45 minutes past my capacity to even like, I'm just like, bro, but I love him and I'm just letting him get it out. And then he pauses and we're like an hour plus in at this point, and like, it was just nonstop talking. He goes, and that's just the power ups. And I was like, oh my God. Like my wife and I lost it. It was amazing. It was just like this one moment in this time where just we talk about it every once in a while. This makes us laugh because he was just so honed in on this. And it was so much like I was totally just like, oh, that's cool. Like for I don't know how long, but and I'm not trying to be mean. Like I'm excited he shared, but like I just didn't have the mental energy to consume what he was throwing at me. And then like that was just the surface level. Like, dude,
The surface level was a barrage.
yeah, I was like, you gotta stop right there. I'm
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but anyways, it's fun
Well,
to see people get excited about the things they're excited about. That's the
yeah.
moral of that story.
And excitement, it's interesting too, because like I've learned that excitement it has a number of flavors to it too. And you kind of have to have the attentional and emotional agility to go, because sometimes excitement is really difficult. Sometimes the things that surface in an interview, for example, I had a show called The Art of Mountain Biking for a couple of years, and I loved this show. And we were just kind of talking about meditation, and talking about certain things, and then all of a sudden, the person we were interviewing starts talking about this story of hers that ultimately it was like a really traumatic thing that happened to her on a backcountry ski trip. And being able to again, with if you're really there with the person and you're willing to show up for whatever comes, sometimes it's really difficult, and it does challenge you as a human being too, to have the willingness to continue to lock eyes with wherever that moment is. But those ones, it's a form of, I won't call it excitement, but engagement and vulnerability that those are the conversations that I feel most changed by as a person. And I feel, add to kind of the rich texture of just my life in general, aside from my craft, aside from what I do for a living, but just being able to be a full human being in that moment those are the moments, again, I said, that, that change you.
Yeah, for sure. I just find it fascinating. You were telling me about your show and that you like were a co-host of this Art of Mountain Biking
Yeah.
and never mountain biked, or were not just
Oh,
not avid, or
well, I do mountain bike, but I wasn't like the expert of the two of us.
okay,
My co-host, she, has been mountain biking for 20 years, and I just kind of took it up during COVID. But what I did have was, I knew how to engage with sport, and I knew how to learn sports and movements and things, how to engage with those kinds of concepts, to where I was like, oh,
sure,
let's just get on there and jam about mountain biking. And uh, that show, it was just on the side, there was no money in it. It was just us nerding out basically. And we were really surprised at how well that show did. And I learned a lot of lessons that I can take into my business too. But it's, uh, it's an enriching thing. Maybe you can identify with this, but when you build something like a podcast, for example, a lot of what I get out of it, at least, is so much more than business. It's like those are the things. It's nice to have a reason to pay attention to a topic all week, and like I'll take this topic and put it on and move around with it and see what insights come. But it was like a way of engaging with my own life and my own sport on a deeper level that I feel like that part doesn't get talked about enough, of like what is actually in it for you beyond monetization or whatever, whenever you put something out into the world, whether it's, a podcast or anything, but just being able to pay attention on that level, it was really super fun and I miss it.
Yeah. No, I've enjoyed this podcast myself, and I can relate to that. It was just communicating with so many different people and hearing their different perspectives, even though it's all like, hey, we're focused around like business and the intersection of business and creativity and art and all that. And it's just interesting to hear all the different journeys and the different perspectives that people have, and the ways that like creativity influences their business and their life and their career, right? Like
Mhm.
I love honestly hearing people's journeys the most, because it's like yourself there. And like we talked earlier in the show, like the way that creatives navigate into wherever they end up is just always so fascinating to me. And same thing with like entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
A lot of times their journey from like, hey, I own this company doing this thing is like crazy, right? Like I still can't animate. Like I've never, but like that's the number one thing that we sell. But I ended up like rebranding this company and focusing on this thing, but it was always something I was passionate about, the storytelling side of things, and wanted to do that, but I just didn't have the avenue to educate myself in that. And I studied mostly graphic design, but also fine art and illustration, so I was able to kind of spin it up and then find people that are better than me at all of these things, so now it's just like this team that we all trust and been together. Now we can do almost anything in the creative space, which is crazy. Like and that feels really good. So I just sort of ADD'd around there, but
Yeah, no, but what I'm hearing from what you're saying, and this is why I love the lens of the conversation so much, because what you just described, I would view that as like, yeah, it's like your conversation with your life, man. Like it does feel like, especially for those of us who have maybe bounced around companies and worked our way into this kind of new economy that's way more mobile than our parents' generation was.
oh yeah.
It does become, at least for me, it feels like a conversation like, hey, I'm going to throw something out. Life is going to throw something back at me. And then we're both going to move and change based on where it goes. And, I love those. I love those conversations that people have with their careers. And maybe I'm like really overdoing it with a metaphor, but like
It's all right.
it's a way of being responsive while also showing up as yourself. And it's a way of staying agile, that I think, I don't know, I just think it adds such a richness and a complexity to the way that you can engage with your life.
Yeah, well, you start to own it, right? Like I don't even, when people ask what I do, it's like I either answer like I'm an artist, or I own a creative studio or something like that. But and that is kind of twofold. Like I have my personal creative studio where I collaborate posthumously with my dad, but then I also have my Epic Made, which is like this animation studio where I don't do any creative at all. Like I create the business,
Yeah.
and that in itself is creative, right? Like understanding the growth and positioning of that. It's a interesting journey. I had to fall in love. One of the guys that I really respect is a local guy here that started a company, and they're like amazingly impressive agency based out of downtown Norfolk. They're called Grow. But like I was listening to him on a podcast, probably a decade ago, and he's like, he's like, I was a designer and I love design, but I had to fall in love with designing a business, and I was
Hmm.
like, oh, okay. And then I started to sort of embrace that more. And that's when I was able to put down my creative hat for a little bit, really focus on growing and positioning the business. And I remember when I was redoing our website for the first time, I was in this like a business complex with a couple other like small businesses, and one of them was like a one-man band design shop. And I was like, what do you think about my new website? And like on the services offering, like we led in with like animation, and he's like, well, it sounds like you're an animation studio now and not a design studio. And I was like, yeah, I think we are. Like, I think I like that. Like, as he
Yeah.
said it, I was like, no, that feels good. I'm gonna own that. And that was an interesting moment, and it just kind of grew and pivoted from there. And so it's just been a fun journey. So yeah.
It's funny that you say that because it's the exact same thing with me. And like, I guess I'm a podcast studio now, but, and you'll know this too. It's, because all of these things blend into each other at a certain point, right? Like
Yep.
you have a visual medium, so of course you can do graphic design and you can probably do brand work too. And I'm assuming, and you can
Yeah, we
probably
do.
do all of these things that go into animation, but people don't always know that that's what they need yet. And so
Mm.
sometimes if you can just lead with the channel or with the medium that they know that they need, then you can get into those conversations and be like, look, like I basically just conduct interviews. Did you know they can turn that into a white paper? Did you know that you can turn that into all these other things? But I think it makes sense to be bite-sized for people sometimes so that, it's like that creates the doorway that it's like, okay, well, if we know how to interview, we can do a whole bunch of other things too. But that said, there is something really special about the audio medium that I do think is way underutilized and way understood. Can we call it that?
Yeah.
Misunderstood, less understood than I would like. That is really, it's a really special and a really unique channel that I'm just so passionate about.
Well, let's dive into it some more. So, like, we're exploring voice as a creative medium, right? So, what does that
Yeah.
really mean to you? Like, outside of that sentence and those words, like being a creative, is that like voice inflections? Is that like so like the things that come to mind are like character acting and all that sort of stuff? But it's not just that, right?
No.
There's something deeper than that there. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
in fact, I don't do much acting at all because mostly the people that I work with end up being scientists and researchers. And
sure.
if there's anything that I've figured out over the course of my career, it's that when humans can connect with humans, they can connect with science better, they can connect with data better, they can connect with anything better, right? And there's something hardwired in our brains that connects when somebody speaks to us. And something that is so unique about audio as a medium is you get people in unguarded moments in their lives, the way it integrates into people's lives. So my guess is that if anybody listens to this episode, they might be commuting, they might be doing dishes, they might be exercising, they might, they might be working on a mindless coding project that they don't really need to pay attention to. It's just cut and paste, right? And so you get people in scenarios where you don't need their eyes, you don't need their visual system, and so it does a couple of things. When you are getting people in the in-between moments, you get access to them when most other mediums can't. Um,
Mm.
because you don't need them to look at you. And what that also does when somebody doesn't have to look at you is it taps into their imagination. And so there's a reason that we love campfire stories, right? There's a reason that oral tradition has gotten us through human history. And we are hardwired for these kinds of stories that not only get us into the world of the presenter, but get us into our own inner worlds and bring those two things together in a way that can create change, in a way that can deepen your understanding of a topic, in a way that can connect you with human beings that you might have nothing in common with, you think. And so it's just a really cool way. And I mean, look at just even the explosion of podcasts now that everything is accessible and anybody can do a podcast, right? Granted, the podcast channel has like gotten more nuanced and more difficult to compete, but there's the appetite is not going away. And there's
Yeah.
a reason for that.
You're absolutely right. And it's that interesting space where nothing else can really reach you. It's like you could listen to music or you could put on a podcast.
Hmm.
And that's like the only time I consume podcasts is like when I'm going for a run or I'm on a walk or I'm like literally doing something else. Because I can't sit still and like I don't read books either, right? Like the only time I consume books is through an audio platform, which and again it's still sort of that same thing. Like it really taps into my imagination. Like
Yeah.
if I'm doing like some tedious like work around my house or fixing my roof or fixing what I'm always fixing something, right? Being a homeowner, my house was made in the 50s. It's like I'm always fixing something, but I can always put on something and learn and kind of be on this creative journey too. And I love fantasy books. I remember like listening through the Lord of the Rings the first time, was like, oh, this is really cool. Because I loved the movies growing up, but I'd never listened to the books. So then I listened to the books and The Hobbit and all that, and just like hearing the differences and like my own imagination taking over. And it was cool. And I had that conversation with a friend of mine's father, who's he's in his 70s now, and he actually said like he couldn't bring himself to watch the Lord of the Rings because he had already loved the books as a kid and read through them so many times that he already had this whole
Mm.
imagination and visuals and things in his head of what exactly this whole thing was. And watching the story was totally different. So it didn't interest him because it wasn't his
Wasn't his world.
picture, his vision and imagination. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a fascinating angle there that I don't think we've ever talked about on the show. So that's cool.
Well, and I just I get in these conversations that I'm like, oh, I want everyone to be me right now because it's something that's really frustrating when you do work with people who are rigorously pursuing knowledge and like really trying to get it right and really being very careful about how they're conducting things and how they're thinking about things. And they won't make the jumps that you want them to make for a good soundbite because they're just so careful thinkers.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, what's so frustrating is you can get in these conversations and you are just like, and if you're, just speak for myself. I am like in love with these people because there's these fascinating, really impressive people that have all of these like really cool ways of thinking about something. And then you flatten it onto a page and it becomes a research paper or it becomes a case study and it gets read by nobody. And, or except other people in the academia. And I'm sitting here thinking, this can change the world. Like this, here's the key, and it
Yeah.
doesn't quite penetrate the larger culture because it doesn't connect, and it's like you have to have a motivated audience who already wants to really know about that thing in order to read your case study or in order to read your brief, or your, God forbid, academic paper,
The
and
white papers. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
when it's like, if you could just hear how he lit up. I am thinking of a particular person who is working on, it's called the tau protein in Alzheimer's disease. And the way that he would speak about tau, and he had this big, beautiful voice, and he was just this glorious, world-renowned scientist, and I'm just mesmerized. And this, the shift to audio first, it's my attempt to like help everyone be me in that moment, because if everyone had heard these really important conversations on the level that I did, because I have been changed as a person so many times by so many interviews. The majority of my interviews changed me as a person and change how I'm thinking about things. I'm like, I need to
Cool.
get more people to do that and get in there so that they can fall in love too, and that they can change in this way that makes everything better for everyone.
Yeah, I mean the knowledge share of human beings, I think, is the core part of what is cool about podcasts, but also like how we've grown as a society over the generations and over and over. Like, it used
Mhm.
to just be like you mentioned this like word of mouth type of stuff and then written language, but it's like this is how we document things, right? And I love the idea that for the first time ever, we're creating. I guess not this past. I don't know when we started recording audio. Was it been like 100 years, maybe give or take?
Yeah, a
Um,
bit more.
yeah, like God, like we have people's voices immortalized, right? Like, and now this generation we have got like pictures of our kid the day he's born, like in my Google thing that comes up. Right? So we all have like documents, like budget documentaries on our lives, like everywhere, which is interesting. And then when you get into all the social media stuff and all that, it's yeah, I don't know, but I think these stories being passed on and people's like the real depth of like their excitement and what they dedicated their lives to being able to be continued to pass on and immortalized and digested by someone who's excited about that in the future, I think is really cool. And then actually having the depth of like their voice or their image or their likeness, kind of into that. And what does that even look like in the future with these like artificial replications of that once you have a
Wow.
good data set, right? Like, I don't know. That all spins
Yeah,
into an even crazier scenario.
I know.
That, yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating stuff, and I love that. Like, yeah, my wife is like deep in the science space and was studied ecology and wetlands and all that sort of stuff. And like, yeah, I used to go to like their presentations and papers and read stuff. And like, one of her professors became very close with us, and he was a eminent scholar, world renowned. His CV is like 4 pages of shit, and this is like, oh my god. But like, sitting around having a drink with this guy and talking about like the bottom of the ocean and where he studies things and all the little creatures and the way things move is just like really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, I can
and
totally get with that.
it used to be only the realm of radio, or well, radio. And
Yeah.
I think now because, since podcasting has exploded as a medium, it gives other people access to, things that may not be newsworthy, but are campfire worthy for sure. And I think there's obviously the opportunity in that you can get a lot of these stories. We can get into, your kitchen table with your professor friend and learn about the bottom of the ocean in a way that you did, and in a way that can be really sticky and profound, and just you can nerd out about stuff.
Yep.
But then again, it's also a space that has gotten incredibly crowded and incredibly noisy, and so it's shifting a bit in terms of how you can actually break through. But even if you don't break through, there is still so much in it for you to like start a podcast, because
Yeah.
even just paying attention to your topic like that and speaking about it and meeting new people, there are so many spillover effects, like I said at the beginning, that you get so much more out of this podcast than just your followers and just your downloads.
100%. I mean, like full transparency, I've never even really tracked how many followers we have or what, because this is for me, this is all about like relationship building and creating an archive of like just talking about creativity and being a part of that conversation. And this will be here long, potentially long after I'm dead. Like if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, my son can go back and go, what did my dad think about this type of stuff? And there's 100 plus hours of me talking to people about all sorts of different things. There's something that's cool about that, for me. And I've done that. My dad was like always way cooler than everybody, and just like way ahead of his time. Like literally, was the first guy you'd ever like. He was in his 60s, I think. He had the first little flip camera things that were like, this is before like social media, when like you could get like a little. It was like a little handheld camera, and he was so pumped on these things. And he just walked down the beach and talk and make videos. And like, there wasn't even MySpace at the time. This guy was creating social media content before there was social media. It was all like a documentary, and I used to love like documentary filmmaking, and he did some acting and stuff like that. So like I go back through these sometimes, and I have like old clips of my dad like walking on the beach talking to who himself, I guess, like his followers. I don't know, like, but there was no followers, right? Like this never even went anywhere. It was just recorded for like the sake of documenting the experience of him being alive, which is, I don't know, maybe it's some form of narcissism, but like it was also just really cool. Like I'm so thankful to have that. So like there's something interesting about sharing these experiences and thoughts, and archiving them, even if it's just to like see the perspective of another human being that was passionate about whatever it is they were passionate on. So
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
and I'm glad you brought up passion too, because like when you were describing that, um, like what an enriching experience for him. Like he must have been having the time of his life doing that kind of thing. And I think that the way that I hear passion spoken about nowadays, maybe it's always been spoken about this way, I don't know. Is like it's like this thing that you have or you don't. And I
Right.
view it as more of like a trainable orientation. And, pick whatever medium you want, paint, record stuff, make social media before MySpace was built, like do those things. But it's a way of pressing into your experience of that moment. It's a way of orienting to the moment, and maybe having output or not, but just the ability to bring a quality of attention like that. This is, and in the beginning we were talking about this, but this is where I think if we treated our attention as art, like what's everything, what universe comes out of that moment, that you might miss if you were just trying to get the information that you need, trying to transact, trying to, build some good ad copy, or trying to create a cool graphic. It's
Mm.
like, no, this is like how you fundamentally change as a person. And this is how creative work, I mean, moves beyond creative work to just like well-being.
Yeah, I love attention as art. That's great. That really, like there's something there that seems like it's got a little magic to it, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you embrace the moment and explore it without like trying to control it or dominate it, right? For me, like that's the real difference between like art and design, right? Like
Mhm.
art is very much like embracing the chaos a bit, like on the journey, like letting in all the variables of life. where design has like a box that you have to control the variables within. And I love kind of trying to crush those two together where it makes
Yeah.
sense. But I love that attention as art. That's a cool quote. We'll make a short of that.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, do you have when I say that, when I say like treating attention as art, is there anything that pops into your head of like a moment that you experienced something that might be akin to that?
Hmm. I don't know if there's a specific thing. It just makes me think of like how I approached the whole podcast though. Like I said was saying earlier, where it's like I literally don't have any questions written down. Like I'm listening to what people are saying and I'm just taking notes and then go, oh, I can ask that question and do that. And it's worked really well for me. And sometimes the idea of it, I've tried to have some co-hosts in the past, and that like makes them nervous, like that there's no plan, nothing to fall back on. And it's like
Hmm.
I'm just here to talk. Like,
Yeah.
I've never had to edit the podcast for dead space. So like,
Yeah.
so yeah, but I think there's something there that's just like, you're dialed in and the inspiration comes, right? So when you focus your attention on like a human to human interaction, I think that the inspiration for good conversation comes, and that for me is what attention as art kind of translated out to when I heard it, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing from what you just said is like there is a fair amount of uncertainty in it. And I think if you can embrace that, you can open up to the magic of whatever happens. I describe, maybe this is dumb, but I describe a conversation like a lot of people think that, you and I are in a conversation, you're bringing 50% of it, I'm bringing 50% of it, or 80/20 depending on the dynamic between the two people. But like, I actually view it more as like a thirds kind of situation to where you're bringing a third, I'm bringing a third, and the other third is kind of this magical thing that happens in the coming together of two people, and it's an openness to, again, just being with wherever the conversation goes, and placing your attention on what actually is there. And doesn't that require a shit ton of comfort with uncertainty? Like it requires well, yeah, just a comfort level of not knowing, or with not knowing. And that's tough. That's tough for a lot of people. It's tough for everyone, I think, in moments, but the more you can do that, and maybe that is where the art starts to emerge, is like, I don't know what's going to come of this. I don't know what I'm making. Let's go find out.
yeah, I'm probably more comfortable with that than most human beings. But I've been practicing for a long time,
Mhm.
and I even took it to the next level with my Wednesday night live stream. Which, if you're listening to this, I have put on hiatus for at least a month or two, just to like, I just needed a reset. I've been doing it for 3.5 years straight. Every Wednesday night, I've taken a couple weeks off, but we'll call it at least 45 to 48 weeks of the year. I was doing this live stream, but I literally would start the show. It's a 2 to 3 hour show every Wednesday night. No idea what I'm doing. Literally zero plan. Like, just we're gonna make some art tonight, and I'll sit there and I'll shoot the shit, and people show up, and I'll start thinking, like, and I'll grab a sketch on my dad's thing, and I'll flip through. It's like, is this one cool? Like, everyone's like, yeah, that one's cool. Boom, snap a picture, throw it in Photoshop, make a piece of art, and like the magic that happened there. So like, sometimes it was frustrating and anxiety and like, oh my god, and this sucks, and like I'm like all the negatives, right? And then, but a lot of times it just got to the point where I was like, I can't believe I just made this tonight. Like, I had no clue what the hell I was doing or going to do, 2 hours ago. And now I have this beautiful piece of art that I made. And
Mhm.
like, I'm really freaking proud of this. Like, oh my God. And that feeling is probably one of the coolest creative feelings I ever have in my life, was this like random summoning of something magical from the ether and put it into some pixels on the screen. And like my old man, before he died, he painted this when he was dying of cancer. I don't know if I'm going to get this without a glare, but
Uh,
let's see. It's just
I
it's
can see it a bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was just like he used to do these crazy faces all the time, and I have a bunch on the wall back there and everything. But he was just like, I mean, literally riddled with cancer, and he like barely can walk. And he goes over to his little art table, and there's just like 50 mason jars and like 35 watercolor paints and paint brushes everywhere. And he just grabs some paint and he's just slinging the shit on there. And like in 15-20 minutes, he makes this beautiful, like angelic looking face. It's that's like one of my most treasured possessions.
It's
And like,
beautiful.
yeah, I just put it up on the mirror in the room, where he died, and like we just sort of laid there and looked at it for the next couple. It was probably like a month or so before he died, and it was just like really cool. Like there was so much peace in the eyes, and but yeah, like he didn't know what he was doing. He just go. That was the magic of my dad's creativity, and what inspired me to be an artist is that he would just walk over to the canvas and have no expectations, like what comes out, and just did, and would just keep working it until he liked it, and then it would be done. Right.
Mm.
And it was like, wow, like that's so like being able to start like just with this almost carefree energy and then declaratively stop is hard too, right? Like, oh, it could work a little more. What if I had a little bit? Like I can't stop sometimes when it's like
Yeah.
I had what I needed, 80% of the way in. I had 80, 20% of the way in, I had 80% of what I needed. I could have stopped at some point. Now I'm like, you know, wasting time almost, and then
Chasing
it
the
just becomes a
dopamine.
whole, yeah, right. This
Yeah.
becomes a whole kind of head trip at some point. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to embrace the chaos, and that was the best example I've ever seen of anyone being able to do that. And he
Mm.
was just this like wild positive energy, and so I mean, he had an equally dark and fucked up side like we all do, I
Yeah, we
think,
all
but
do.
that balance was equally interesting. But yeah, really powerful creative energy there for sure. So
Are you willing to share his name? What's his name?
yeah, Teddy
Eddie.
Cleanthus. That was the
Uh,
old man. Yeah, yeah. And I talk about him all the time. The whole live stream's dedicated to him,
mm,
the Wednesday night. So I take every piece of art I do, I incorporate a piece of his art into it, whether it's like the centerpiece or if it's just like a texture I add in at the end. And yeah, no, I mean I've been like very public about all my stuff with him and like all my just pain, and like he's it'll be a decade actually. He died in 2016. So this upcoming year will be 10 years, and like every year I make like a memorial piece for him, and but I'm finally
mm,
like feeling really healed about it, like it all sort of makes sense. But it took a long time, like, and I even took care of him like the past 3 months of his life, and it just I thank God for my wife just holding down our whole life, because I just fell apart and was just
yeah.
worthless. My team ran my company, and my wife ran our life, and I don't even remember like the first 2 weeks after he passed. It's crazy, but like art and creativity helped me heal all that, which was
Yeah.
really beautiful. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I feel the same way about conversations too. And how interesting that when you do show up, like look at how we got there and look at how we got to your dad. And it's just, it's one of those moments that you described that, like, the feeling, one of the greatest feelings in the world of like sitting in front of something, not knowing anything about what's going to come. Like that feeling is a need for me. Like if
mm,
I'm not
yeah,
living in a way that creates those experiences and creates those, opportunities to have that feeling, I'm not okay. And
sure,
I think that being able to what I've learned as I've gotten older is how to find that feeling in new ways that might have been boring to my younger self, and might have been because again, with creatives, a lot of times you have to make compromises in order to make money, frankly.
yep,
And the more that you can, I had the attitude of like, oh, well, that's not writing, even though it was definitely like I was writing for a living.
right,
But it was because it was this kind of writing that didn't look like what I thought it would look like when I was a kid. But the more you can let go of that and press into that experience with this, artful attention, that's when you get that, at least for me, like I get that need met more, just by being open to and knowing and having a couple of techniques for how to find it within any situation.
that's amazing. Wow, I was gonna let you end on that, but now I have to ask what those couple of techniques are.
Um, yeah, I think again, just so when you were talking about your dad, and I was
Hmm.
picking up on the fact that this is something that's really important to you, asking one more follow-up question, then you think, what's his name? That is something of, it is one action. You can add one follow-up question that it does so many things at once. It shows the person that you are interested in them. It goes there with the person, like you are with them in that moment and with them in that topic, and it's specific enough that they feel your attention. And
Mm,
that's when people start to open up, and that's when you can start to open up and come in there with them. And so that's one of the that was a technique.
okay.
But I mean, it's genuine, and it comes from like a genuine wanting to connect place, but also, I mean, just what we've been talking about this whole time of, um, not making the assumption that you know what you're looking for. And if you can just like start anything, any endeavor, I don't care if it's a spreadsheet, do practice it, like, I don't know what this is going to look like, and kind of embrace that curiosity and embrace that spirit of doing anything. Do it when you do your dishes, and just get some reps into it. Then that's when you can start to turn passion into a thing you do rather than something you're trying to find or something you have or don't have.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote, and I don't know who said this, and I should, but not all who wander are lost, right? Wandering in itself is exploration and part
Yeah.
of the process of creativity.
Yeah.
So love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we are coming up on time, but before we wrap, I do have one last question for you. Is there anyone or anything in your career you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, a valuable resource, or a favorite client?
Mm. Um, there's a lot of people that come to mind, but I think the single biggest one for me was my college coach, Beth Lanier. I doubt she would listen to this. She might if I sent it to her, but she was one of those pivotal teachers of mine who first taught me about this kind of attention. And I had, let's say I had some mental health needs when I was an athlete. And she adapted to me. And usually team sports coaches don't
No.
do that. They break you down to rebuild you into the team. But she was attuned, is the word I'm looking for. She attuned to me and kind of the specific things that I brought to the team. And I've never forgotten her. And I've learned most of how I approach my life and my discipline, and the attunement. I learned a lot of that from her. So I'm really, really grateful to her.
Awesome. Well, shout out to Coach Beth. That's amazing.
Yeah, she's still there. I think she's up like 35 years now at the University of Utah.
Hell yeah, volleyball coach, huh?
Yep.
Okay, very cool. So I guess you're like 6 foot then, huh?
Yeah. Oh, not quite. I was always tallest of the short half. I'm 5'11".
Okay, fair. Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
So,
great. Most of us are.
Awesome. All right. Well, big thank you to Crystal Lee Beck for connecting us of Comma Copywriters. I think she was our last guest, I believe. Yes,
Cool.
she was. Yeah. Her episode just released today, which will be not today when everyone's listening to this, but all the same. Anyhow. All right. Well, we've been talking to Danielle, who's the founder of Danielle LeCourt. You can check out her website at daniellelecourt.co. That's DELECORUT.co. But if listeners want to follow up with you directly, where's the best place to go?
Probably LinkedIn. You can find me Danielle LeCourt, or you can just email me at danielle@daniellelecourt.co.
Awesome. All right, Danielle. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
Take it easy. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.